Forget me, but may they see you and hear what I'm saying about you. Is a promise keeper, but there's a part you play. And with every step, I'm like, God, we over here doing our part, and I know you're going to show. You're trying to ever convince me that there is no God. I said, save your breath and your frustration. I don't even have to go back to the Bible. Do you have time for me to tell you all my ministries are in the marketplace outside of the building? No one has a monopoly on hard times. When I tell you everybody's being challenged, the difference is, are you going through it with God? Do you know God? Do you recognize that God can help us? We doing that new one, release your power, because baby. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I always consider it an honor when I get a chance to minister uh, to God's people and introduce God through music to people. Who's B Renee? First of all, so everyone will know, they always wonder, like, where did the B come from? B Renee. My first name is actually Belinda. B Renee is one of these people that I love. I love to sing, even though I'm very shy. People can't believe it. I accept engagements, but I'm always like this because I'm one of those that, okay, if you call me and tell me the engagement's off, I'm okay with that too. But always very shy, but we'll accept, we'll show up. I'm one of these people, I'm very professional. You tell me a time, I'm going to be there before that. You tell me your set is for this amount of time, I'm going to do that. I don't get that deep in the spirit where you told me 20 minutes, but I'm going to do 30. No, you give me a directive, I follow. And so I do love to sing. I know the power of God uses me. And I always come away saying, God, I thank you because I know that people felt what I felt. And they got blessed from youth using me. But besides that, I love to laugh. I love to dance. How we came to be Renee. 2003, a woman prophesied on me that, oh, you're going to sing all over and God is going to bless you. And I always sang because it's just something I did. And we're from a family, especially my father's side, where everybody is singers. But like I said, I was very shy about it. And I was very content being praise and worship leader for 15, 20 years at my old church. Being that, a wife and mother, I was good. I didn't need to go anywhere else. I was good ministering to your children and being a wife. That was ministry. So I was good in doing praise and worship. But this prophecy came and I remember standing there and I'm like, oh Lord, here we go. But I received it. So after I did my first single, I said, Lord, well, what name? Because the church world knew Renee. But the professional world and at work knew Belinda because you always sign, my name is Belinda Renee, but you always sign your first name. So, grow up in school, educational wise, professional wise, Belinda. I said, well, if I put Belinda, the people in the church world won't know it. If I put Renee, but guess what? I'm writing it there at work, and I worked at the VA right in the Bronx. And I remember sitting and writing B Renee, and the Lord spoke to me, said, every time you write B, the B is not going to stand for Belinda. It's going to stand for BE, as in exist, and be Renee. Don't try to do it like anybody else. Don't get caught up in how that one does it or how they minister. So every time, remind yourself, because God also knows your makeup. He made you. So he knew that I was always very shy and I was always like in awe of other people. And I was one of these people that would always go up to singers, never jealous, was like, oh my God, you sound so good. Oh, I love your voice. I was never had a jealous spirit. And anytime that would come upon me, I would do the opposite and go compliment them because I'm like, devil, we're not doing that because there's enough room for all of us. There's too many souls out here. So, but God also knew my makeup, that I was kind of shy and that but I don't sing like this one and I don't reach those high notes. And back in the day I did, but I had some vocal issues where I couldn't sing for months, so that had me depressed for a while. But God said, I'm gonna use you right where you are. I was a high soprano girl. Okay. I would have been out here like with Yolanda Adams and all, but like sinus issues and all that. So that messed with my head for a while, you know. But God will use you right where you are. And what happens a lot of times, and that happens, it shows more of a dependency on Him. You're not going in yourself. It's like, you know what, God, this is what I got left. Do what you got to do with it, and we're going to be all right long as the people are blessed. So God always, and even to this day, and that was what, 2004, and now that's what, 22 years ago. To this day, when I look at B Renee, or what people say, B Renee, God always reminds me, be who I called you to be. especially in this time now. When you look on social media, the big thing is how many runs and riffs, and everybody's trying to be like everybody else. Oh my God, I don't know, running on that. But you know what? Guess what? I thank God for the anointing destroys the yoke, removes the burden in people's lives. So, but that's how I came to be Renee. And it was as plain as day. The Lord was speaking my spirit. He said, exist in who I've called you to be. Don't do it like anybody else. Don't sing it like anybody else. Because you notice, like in our church, you know me, I'm straight up old time gospel singer. I know our church, I love our church. We do a lot of CCM and stuff. But if you call it me, you know what I'm gonna do. You already know. And I love our church for it because they know what I'm gonna bring and they love it. Number one, people can feel your heart and where you're coming from. Of singing, all I know to do is sing. My father was a great singer, soloist in the church for many years, mostly in Seventh-day Adventist churches. So I would go around with him singing, and my parents saw that or heard that I could sing. And as the Bible says, train up a child in the way that he should go, so when he get older, he won't depart from it. So they saw the gift, and they just helped me hone into it more. So I thank God I went to 125th Street and 8th Avenue on a train by myself back in the day for lessons with a professor, William H. Collins, who has gone on to be with the Lord. But he taught me in terms of enunciation, making sure whatever you're singing, people understand the words, especially in gospel. Because what's the point if they don't? You're supposed to be ministering through songs, so if they don't understand what you're saying, what are you doing? I might as well scat, do a little jazz. You see what I'm saying? So I appreciate that from him. And what I also appreciate growing up in a house, a Christian home, both sides of my family, mother and father, a lot of preachers. So I grew up saved whether I wanted to be saved or not, because those were the rules. But I don't despise my humble beginnings and I don't despise how I was reared, because the one thing I could say, having the gift to sing and also knowing from just watching my mother's life, especially, I honored God. I was real about my relationship so that when I would sing the power of God, and that's the only thing that ever mattered to me when I was 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, up to where I am now at 66. My biggest thing, whether it's two in the audience or 1,000, and it's been that great. God, let your anointing rest and let people receive what I'm giving out. Forget me, but may they see you and hear what I'm saying about you. I love people. I can just meet you and have a 3 hour conversation. I love people. I went to college. That's where I met my husband. Um, and right in the middle of college, I left and joined the Air Force. So, and back in the day, growing up in a very, very strict church, you got more of what you couldn't do than what you could do. And as Tamla Mann says in her song, Take Me to the King, I was all churched out. Not that I ever had a need to do anything wrong, because that wasn't my thing, but I knew there was so much more in the world to see. I never smoked, I never drank, I never did anything crazy. First of all, I was too scared of everything and everybody. I didn't want, so I always, I didn't try too much. But so I went into the Air Force, and even while in the Air Force for 4 years, I was always getting reminders wherever I was singing in the Air Force, somebody would either come up to me prophetically and say, God's desire for your life is to sing. When I mean, that's a whole nother conversation for us. I'm just trying to make it quick. But God had his hand on me through the ups and downs, the ins, the outs, the good times, the bad times. God always had his hands on me. So I made it through the Air Force, and um, as most people know, or there are people for the first time know, that my husband passed back 13, it'll be 13 years, and well, made 13 years from 9/11. He didn't die on that day, but he ended up with three cancers and died in 2012. And that took my ministry to another level, because that experience alone, someone you had been with for 35 years, and then all of a sudden they're gone. I'm 52 and he's 56, and it's just me and my daughter. I leaned into God, and I was so glad that I had relationship with him before my husband passed and through his sickness, because when you deal with a death, it can go one way or the other. People either turn away or they lean in. And I'm so glad that I leaned in, and God just moved and showed me so many things. But God always dealt with me. God dealt with me the year before 9/11, and God said, get more life insurance. And I'm like, what? Because me and my husband were young, we were invincible. He had some from the job, I had some from the job. We didn't have anything else because we were like, oh, why think about it? But God would not let me rest. I told my husband, I said, we got to go get more life insurance because God is, and he respected the God in the relationship that I had with him in the closest. So he said, let's do it. We went to Allstate down the block from where we live. My daughter's sitting between us, and we took out a great policy. Never thought about it again. I said, automatically deducted the year before 9/11. 9/11 came, he had no signs of sickness, but if you hear the commercials, people are still just finding out about cancers. But anyway, long story short, when he passed, everything was in place. I was able to pay off my daughter's college. So it's one of those things when I sing or minister, or even when some people see me praising God, I'm thinking about all the things he's done and all the ways he's made and how in awe I am of him. People are like, well, did you expect anything less? No, but God still blows my mind. This human mind, God still blows my mind. Like, God, you love me so much that you saw the end of my husband's journey, but my daughter and I were left out there. We never missed a beat financially or anything else. God took care of us. Yeah, I cried for him. I missed him in the natural realm, but I also knew that I leaned and pressed in. So with singing, that heightened more because unless you've been through that particular relationship loss, not to diminish any other but all I knew was losing a husband. I don't know about a child or just recently lost my father, but I know how God showed up for me and how I allowed him to show up for me. Now, even when I was crying in grief, I would just start saying, Jesus, Jesus, in the pillow, in the pillow. So God has just been amazing and being a mother. She's 30, so she's 33 years old, my one and only. I adore her. I love her. When I look at her, she reminds me so much of my husband. She's one of the biggest reasons why I didn't fall apart when he passed because I knew she was looking at me, and I was always that mom where not so much what I say, but what I do. And I had to show her that, you know what, baby? Your father's going to be with the Lord. He's not coming back here. One day we're going to go to where he is. I said, but in the meantime, what we going to do? Are we going to live or die? She said, Mommy, we're going to live. I said, not just exist. Live. I said, because if we don't, if we fold, that means we've made your father a God. Because we die, he died, then we're going to be walking around like the walking dead. And I said, God is a jealous God. And I said, you have to remember that we have an assignment. We have ministry. And I said, God is going to heal us. It's a process. I said, but God just didn't die for our sins, but he died for our grief. He sent his son to. I said, so we need to take advantage of that as well. So I love being a mother. And as you can tell, I love being a grandmother. I am just as crazy in love for those two little boys. And what's so weird is I call them the Twin Towers because I said, Lord, after my husband passed because of the falling of the Twin Towers, you gave me Twin Towers. And because they're tall for their age. And I said, God, thank you. And so they keep a smile on my face. And, I thank God for my sisters who, they sing. Matter of fact, Miss Momac, the one that's just under me, she's very instrumental in my music. She and I have written a lot of songs together. We're getting ready to release a new song. We just came out of a studio called Release Your Power. And I'm here to tell you that song was ordained by God. Matter of fact, Bronx MC got a part to play in that song. So when I tell you, it's like a war cry because of the times that we're in now. It's one of those songs of taking a position of offense, not defense. Enemy, before you even come for me, I'm coming for you. And when I tell you that song, I can't wait. I'm going to sing it at the occasion. And instrumental. She and I have collaborated on a lot of the songs that uh, I've written through the years. What she does for me, I have that creative mind, but she can put everything in order on paper because I'm all over the place. Here, here, here. I go from A to J, then back to H. She puts stuff in order because I'm hyper, and I thank God for that. Not only that, she has a great business sense. Because left up to me, like, okay, I'll come, no problem, don't worry about. She makes sure everything. Matter of fact, I told her about tonight, but she had something else to do. But I always keep her abreast. So God has the setup and how, with my sisters, God is just so good. He puts things in place and people in place, and people that know your spirit. I don't play about God and I don't play about music. And they know that I'm very real, to the point where I can go to sing for something and they'll ask me, what you gonna do? I said, I don't know until I get there. I come with a repertoire of what possible songs, and if God doesn't change it, I go with what I put down. But I always wait, because I come with something, but I don't know the needs of the people that you're singing amongst. So when God had dropped something, I could be in the middle of a set, and if God drops a hymn, I'm gonna start singing that hymn, because He knows what the people need. And my thing is, I don't want them to leave the way they came. If they came with an issue or a problem, or a dilemma or obstacle or burden down, may one of those songs or something I say touch them. And only God knows what they're going through. I don't need to know. I just need to listen to God when He says, okay, yes, this one is fine. Sing that song or sing this one. So they always know me like, she doesn't know until I said, don't ask. These are the 4 or 5 I'm going to do, but you know how I flow. In terms of testimony, um, a lot of times ministries are birthed after much travail. And, I did mention my husband passed, and then the Lord and I had a talk. I was watching John McCain's funeral. And I watched the wife the whole time sitting there, and I'm like, I know exactly how she's feeling, what she's going through. And I said, God, I need to do something with this. Long story short, that's when I began to speak with God about starting a widow and widowers group. So I've had a private page called the Two Village, TWO standing for Together We Overcome. And the private page that God gave me. We used to do Zooms as well, but I need to pick up on that, because life is changing. I think a lot of times after COVID, people are like so burnt out with Zooms and everything. So I feel, but the page is a private page, and people come on it that God gave me, and it's not just for women; it's for widowers as well. And it's been a blessing. It's been in existence now for 6 years, because I wanted a page after I was widowed, and I'd go on Facebook. Most of those pages were depressing. And I was like, no, 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 no. I need something to help. So then I said, you know what? Let me start. And when I started, the biggest thing I always tell people, uh, first of all, I'm sorry that you're on here, because I know the reason you're here because you had a loss. But I let them know that the foundation is Jesus Christ, okay? And that we pray. Sometimes I'll come on live and just start praying, and then I'll go away, and I tell other. But what it is that it's but I let people know it's a support group where you don't have. There's no titles, reverend, evangelist, prophet. These are a bunch of people that lost a spouse and need the support in the natural. We talk about all kind of stuff. When did you take off your wedding band? Do you still have it? Are his clothes still in the house? How are your children? What are you doing to on those anniversaries of death or wedding anniversary, birthday? We discuss everything, and it's been such a blessing. Sometimes I would think, like, do people really want this page? And they'll come back and say thank you, because I'll say, oh, put up a picture of you and your husband, any videos you have, and it's like a safe space. I have like maybe 120 members now, and there's men on it too. There's widowers on it too, and some of the widows, they're like, are any widowers on here? Because they never say anything. I said, they're on here, but widowers, they grieve differently than widows. I said, but trust me. And then one of the widowers, who I forgot was on the page, he said, we're here. And what I did, I said, let me tell you something. I said, when God gave me this page, it's not about if you ever say anything or post anything. You don't have to. Some people come on and just read, and it reminds them they're not alone. Some people post and express their feelings because that helps them. I'll come on at times, like I said, I'll either pray or put up something funny or say, when is your anniversary? Or, it's just one of those pages you can come on and be yourself, safe space, no judgment. And that in itself is one of my biggest babies besides singing, is that supporting widows. To this day, I have people sending me references. I have them from as young as 35 to 70 something years old, young widows. So I Never in my life. I just thought I'd go along singing and have a husband and a daughter and, like, life issues, but never thought that this would be my ministry. But I thank God that I was able to heal enough and accepted the charge that people need that safe space that they can come to. And even those that say, would get on and say, I'm upset with God. Guess what? I'd say, that's okay. I said, you know why it's okay? Because there's nothing you could do so great where God will love you anymore, and nothing you could do so bad that he'll love you any less. He loves you. I said, and take it like this. I said, you ever notice when a little baby is sick? Any other day when they're well, they might come grab your legs. Oh, mommy, I love you, or give you kisses. But when they're sick in that bed, that day or during that time, you're not hearing, I love you. I said, so when you're grieving, God gets it. So if you don't like, God, I bless you tonight, God, I did, he ain't gonna love you any less. I said, because when my husband died, there was times I tell God I didn't want to, I said, I don't want to talk to you tonight. I had a conversation. But I also was just so convinced, and I knew without a doubt that he loved me anyway. He understood my pain. I mean, a union that becomes one. So there was a tearing in my soul. You see what I'm saying? But outside of singing, the two village, together we overcome village, is my heart, has my heart, has my heart. And I'm very glad that God and I had that conversation because I know he dropped it in my spirit. Whether I talked to him or he talked to me, we talked to each other. And I started that group. And like I said, it's been about 6 years now, and people come on and say, I'm having a bad day, please pray for me. They post pictures of their husbands. And the thing about the page, it doesn't stop there. A lot of times I'll ask them, who's dating again? Who wants to get married again? Because even though we're there to support that, the reality of it is that as you heal, and you're young enough or whatever, you might want somebody else in your life. And it's okay. Because God has made our heart big enough to always love our deceased mate, but to love somebody here and who you need for where you are now. You see what I'm saying? So I remember one day I said, anybody dating? And I said, yeah. I'm out there. And it was almost like it relieved people because they didn't know where I was. I said, listen, I'm very real. We talk real stuff here. Okay. My husband was my boo. Okay. I ain't playing no games, but I also knew as I healed. And people like, how do you know you're ready? You don't know when you're ready. I started dating and realized I wasn't ready. I just stopped. And I said, you can't wait to be 100% healed because how do you know when that 100%? How do you put a number? But just know enough that you're more healed than not. You know, and if you're still saying I'm looking for somebody like my husband, you ain't ready because who God sent me now, is not the same personality, anything like my husband. He gave me for who I need right now, where I am. But you're a different person. You're not the same person. Just even in general. I mean, my husband passed at 52. I'm 66 now. Seen a lot of things, been a lot, and just that whole grief journey, you're different, you evolve. So he gives you, but that, besides singing, but during that time, my ministry of song, as much as it help other people, it helps me during that time. A lot of times people's like, you accepting engagements? And I still was, maybe because I was still in shock and that's what I did. But I realized that what God puts inside of you, a lot of times is not just for everybody else. It will show up for you when you need it, when you're going through. Because when I'm in here by myself and I start singing unto the Lord, it's not he's the only audience anyway. Audience of one. Right? So and what I be feeling me too, girl, sometimes I be in here just a crying. And you see me, I be shouting. So I put my music on and I be going. With my mom, first of all, I still go through and have moments where I just cry because that was the strongest that woman I know. And I'll say with it, and I don't mince words, and everybody in my family knows, my sisters knows, it's because of my mother that I am where I am in Christ. That woman remained steady, faithful. Her father was a pastor, and she had three brothers that are pastors. But even outside of that, I watched her life and saw her life, and just strong together, dressed well, articulate, clean, everything just so together. So to watch her, um, yes, excellence, a woman of excellence. in God and just in general. To watch her, the change in her, sometimes it just throws me off. I cry. I cry because it's the, there's days where she'll think she's my aunt. Days she'll forget that she has four daughters, and I remind her that, you know, is a lot of little things because I have conversations with her, and my heart gets so heavy. But the one thing I always notice, she has not changed in terms of scriptures and encouragement. That part of her. See, the spirit man doesn't die. So that part, she doesn't even know sometimes when she'll say something to me that I need at that moment, you know. But I'm not going to say it's not easy. This dementia thing is a beast. It's ugly. Because physically she just had a physical so together, but she always watched her weight, watched what she ate. So like I always tell people, listen, you do right by your body do right, unless it's some, calamity like 9/11 or a car accident. But after that, so she always watched. So she's at 85 years old. The doctor's like, she's doing great. But the mind, she has vascular dementia, which means her short term. I can tell her something and 5 minutes later she'll forget. And then I repeat it. So it's hard. That's honestly, this is the worst thing I've ever experienced. This is harder than watching my husband go through with cancer, and I watched him lose weight, and that's a whole nother journey for another time. But his mind was intact. See, when the mind is not, it's and so that I just pray and ask God to help and thank God, I'm not going through it by myself. I have my sisters and all, and my daughter, and so I'm able to talk it out. And for a while I was doing therapy as well. For all the people that don't believe in therapy, I believe in God and therapy. I have my therapist on speed dial when I need it, because a lot of times it's good to have somebody that's not part of anything, just to talk it out, because that's basically what you're doing. But anyway, so I'm dealing with it. It's a day by day. Some days it gets me down, really down, but I know I can't stay there. And some days it's pretty light. So it depends. My grandson, now that's a journey. That's a testimony, because I remember when my daughter, when she was pregnant, she said the doctor said that baby B, which was Cameron, Hunter and Cameron, had fluid on his brain. And I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Well, we're going to pray. I'm going to pray." And I remember going to the bathroom or something. I forgot where we were, but I know I left her presence for a while. And the Lord said to me, "I am an absolute God." And I'm like, "Absolute?" I said, "Okay." And I went and looked it up. He said, "I'm absolute. I'm not a relative God." So I looked at relative versus absolute. Absolute is depending of nothing and no one, independent. Whereas relativity is always dependent on something. I am absolute healer. I'm an absolute promise keeper. And I went back to her and I said, Cameron is going to be fine. And there was some other issues. So he came out, had to have cataract surgery at 6 months old, eye surgery. Um, she had him during COVID. But like I tell people, God is a promise keeper, and we pray and God will work things out. But there's a part you play. You just don't sit around saying, God, I need a job. But you ain't put no resume together. You haven't gone out and did what you need to do. You have nothing. From 6 months on, we had him in early intervention through virtual therapists. So we started early intervention because we noticed, and the good thing was when you have a twin that's moving normally, you know where the other one should be. So we noticed he didn't sit up when his brother sat up. He would fall over. So, but long story short, we were during COVID. We did it virtually. Then when that was over, and being thank God had me retire at the right time, I was taking him to a place where outpatient. Then he went to a school where it was a half a day. Then now he's at a school where it's all day. I get him to all his appointments, eye appointments. He has braces on his legs, and with every step, I'm like, God, we over here doing our part, and I know you're going to show up. And God has used so many different people and avenues to remind us, I didn't forget my promise. You just gotta, like the pastor always says, our pastor, Our expectation of God has no expiration date. Whatever God promised, hold on to it. Say it. And my cousin always says, say it till you see it. And so um, I've watched where he's come, and there's a minister in my apartment building. I don't know him that well. One day he was walking by Cameron. Cameron wasn't even here. He said, God got a calling on his life. And he kept walking. And I don't know if you at church that Sunday when the pastor gave me a handkerchief. And he was praying over it with Pastor Samoran. And I knew before he said his name, I said, this is for Cameron. And when he gave it to me and put it over him. So God, when you have those moments where you're like, God, are you still? God will send something or somebody to remind you that I got this. And the testimony that he's going to have, and to see from where he's been to where he's come through, because he's at a school where the Board of Education said, we don't know if there's any openings there. He might have to go to another school for it in the meantime. But I knew the best one was Elizabeth Seating in White Plains here in New York. And I said, God, I want that one. I want that one. I want the best for your child. And they said, well, if somebody else called you first, that's who. The first and only call we got was from Elizabeth Seaton. You see what I'm saying? That's why I tell people, if you're trying to ever convince me that there is no God, I said, save your breath and your frustration. I don't even have to go back to the Bible. Do you have time for me to tell you all my testimonies? I don't have to tell you what happened in the days of old. I don't have to go through Genesis to Revelation. Let me tell you, and will never get me to explain it away. I always tell people, whatever you know God to do, don't ever allow anybody to make you explain. You can't explain it away. I know what. How would I know to get insurance before something called 9/11? You know, and that my husband would end up with cancer from that. What? A plane hitting buildings? The year before we had this in place? Because if we would have waited and they caught something, we wouldn't have gotten the policy that we got. That I was able to pay off my daughter's Adelphi University, which was $90,000. I wrote him a check. You see what I'm saying? I saved for her wedding. I saved for my retirement. That's the kind of policy he took out. Because so I said, you can't tell me what, who God is in my life. Ah! And my thing is this: if you don't believe in him or you don't think he can do anything, that's exactly how it'll be for you. Like I tell people, if you say you can, you're right, and if you say you can't, you're right. Whichever one you say, that's what you're gonna follow. That's what you're gonna do. I said, but baby, the God that has shown up for me, Heather had those boys 11 days later. She was in a hospital for 4 days, walking around with postpartum preeclampsia, didn't even know she had high blood pressure. She could have stroked out. She had no symptoms. I had made a tea. The tea burned on her hand. She went to urgent care. They checked her blood pressure. They said it's high. She said, I don't have blood pressure. Everything's for me is fine. It's normal. They checked the other arm, blood pressure. They said, have you had any surgeries lately? She said, I just delivered twins 11 days ago. They said, get to the emergency room now. He ended up in there for 4 days. That's why I tell people, you don't understand my praise. I'm not just for what he's going to do, but when I think back on all the ways I mean, she walking around, they said, you didn't have blurred vision, no swell, nothing. I said, girl, you could have choked out. Her pressure was so high. But when you pray over, I'm praying over my grandchildren for when I'm going to be with the Lord, God is still going to honor. I pray over them now for if I'm not around when they're 25, 30, 35, 40. I say, God, because you did it for the people of old when they went on to be with the Lord, you still honored those prayers. I said, this is the list for Cameron and Hunter. The biggest thing for me is that I just keep on loving on them. I don't nag them. Well, God has been good. I don't say none of that. I just act normal. My normal Renee. Like, girl, let's go to lunch. Or girl, or let them talk it out. Because I know if I didn't have God, I could be in the same position or where I am in God. Put it this way, how? Because it's been a lot of years, and I grew up in it or whatever. Even though there's some people that grew up in it, but still. But the point is, I don't. I remember working at the VA, and people used to always watch me because they knew I didn't walk around talking about Jesus, but I used to give a gospel concert once a year at the VA in the Bronx. But I never went around with the "What would Jesus do" blouse and shirt and all that kind of stuff. I was, I was just being crazy with Belinda at work and dancing with the patients in the waiting room. And And one guy said to me something, and I think he said, "You're a Christian, right?" I said, "Yeah, I am." I'm checking his vision and doing everything because I worked as an ophthalmic technician. I did all the diagnostic testing for anybody that had eye disease. And he said, "Well, I'm an atheist. So what do you feel about that?" I said, "I love you anyway, and there's nothing you could do about it." I said, "So now read the chart." And he smiled. Because sometimes all you have to do is be kind, be nice, be a good listener. And then sometimes people will like, there's something different about them. And they might ask, You go to church or what? Why do you smile?" And then the door is opened. And I've met people that has come on the page that when we used to have Zooms and be cussing up a storm that never moved me or bothered me. They just have to get it out. The widow so upset and so just so, and I understand that this was your partner, your boo, two or one, and just especially well, I can't no, well, I'll just say this, and I wouldn't stop them, and they'd be like, "Excuse me, I'm sorry." I said, "Get it out." I said, because I met some people, their whole language is cursing, and I met people where theirs is not, but they're more evil. I wouldn't turn my back than ones that might curse. I said, that doesn't really move me at all. I understand where you are. At least you came on the page and want to be a part. And this is a safe space. Say what you need to say. Get it out. Get it out here. Because I said, what you have to understand is that I understand how the enemy works. He'll take that area of grief, and he'll that open door, and he said, let's throw some depression in there. Let's throw some suicidal thoughts in there. Let's throw some anxiety in there. All of that. That's why come on our Zooms, call me. Everybody that's on there have my number. I have I've done more one-on-one where I'd be on the phone with hour and a half crying. They're just crying. I'm just listening. No judgment. I'm not telling you, that like it's been a year. I said, and so this is somebody you were with 35 years. You think it's gonna be over in a year? So in that moment, God will tell me what to say. Sometimes God doesn't tell me to say anything. I'll say, wait till the end. I said, can I pray for you? Because I'm here just to listen. I said, now, well, make a date. I'm going to call you such and such a time. I said, if I call and you don't feel like talking, don't you feel a bill of guilt? Because you don't know how you're going to feel the next day. When you suffer a loss, you could say right now, okay, call me tomorrow. Come tomorrow, you don't want to talk. So in that time, in terms of people that turn away or whatever, it's something how God, that's when you know God has anointed you for a certain area. Because he tells you how to show up. Because this is new to me. I lost one husband. I don't know how to deal with other widows. I had my stuff, and my husband's death, in terms of how he died, I had some who just had a heart attack. They weren't even sick, just dropped dead. Mine was a husband through an illness, but I was believing God for him to come through it. So I didn't know how to do it. I'm not a therapist, and I used to tell him, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm nothing. We're just sharing. And the biggest thing I could say to you is that I am praying for you. We're praying for each other. But please, besides our page, where we just share, find yourself a good therapist, grief support, all of that. Do whatever you need to do. But on this page, at the end of the day, I'm going to pray because God can go where the therapist can't go. God can go where my listening ears can't go. You just, even no matter how much it hurts, just be open to receive from God. Even if you don't know how it's going to work out and the pain is so great. I used to say, God, I can't wait to heal. And I'd be bawling, crying, girl. I mean, in my pillow, screaming, and would still say, God, I can't wait to heal. So that's how God just in the moment, a lot of times, God will. And if I don't get anything, the biggest thing is I listen. I listen. Like, I understand. I respect that. I got you, girl. I get it. No, like, well, you shouldn't feel that way. Oh no. Once you do that, people gonna shut down. I'm not gonna tell you how to feel. First of all, I don't know the dynamics of your marriage. I've had people on there that has confided in me, even in terms of when my husband passed, we wasn't in a good place. I said, that doesn't mean that you can't grieve. I said, because me and my husband had times where we weren't in a good place, but he had a long illness, so it was different. But let's say at the moment, if it was a heart attack or something, and we had just finished arguing, you can't. You still have that with your husband. You love them, but the enemy wants to bring that guilt on you. Like maybe if I would have, I said, but I'm gonna pray with you on that. God gonna bring you through. So there's so many different scenarios, So, but and that's how I know it's God because in each situation, when a person is talking, now sometimes I'm sitting in there, God, give me the words. What should I say? Should I say anything? Should I just pray? But at the end of the day, if I don't know what else to say, I'll just pray. And while I'm praying, God will give me in the prayer what to say. And a lot of times on the other end, you could hear that their heart is being touched because you could either hear the crying or something. So God, I praise God for being that availability and listening to his voice. And because I also recognize this is not me about me. And I'm not one of I've never been a person that need a lot of this. Matter of fact, that makes me uncomfortable. I'm like, oh girl, this is all God. I just want them healed. I want them to be okay. It's not about me. So if I don't end up saying anything and just listen, say, can I call you again just to check on you another day? They said, sure. I always will, outside of introducing myself, I like to give words of encouragement. And I'm very conscious of not, of, I'm very conscious of doing less talking and more singing. But in between, I like to, give words of encouragement. I don't know. This is something different because it's in a mall. And I love that because we need to be a church without walls. Like I tell people, for a lot of us, most ministries are in the marketplace outside of the building. We come back in the church to get renewed, revived, restored, encouraged, all of that good stuff, and then we go back out. So I know I like that kind of challenge. One song I can tell you we doing that new one, Release Your Power, because baby, because of the climate that we're living in, I'm not just talking about political, but the change in weather. Everybody I talk to is going through something. No one has a monopoly on hard times. When I tell you everybody's being challenged, the difference is, are you going through it with God? Do you know God? Do you recognize that God can help sustain you through this? Do you know that you can cry out to him when you feel that you're at your weakest? So my biggest thing, because it's going to be in a more like God, I'm thinking of certain songs actually because I'm very calculated in that way. And like I said, unless God changes it, I because of where it is, it's not in a church. It's outside. People might be there that has never been to a church. So I like to address and think of some of the songs or some of the lyrics that will touch people that might not ever been in the church building. So in that way, I'm very calculated. Then on your church, you have to figure out what to sing. If you go to an all Baptist church and they like hymns, you can't come with the Israel Houghton and the Kirk Franklin because they don't identify with that. So they'll walk away with like, it was okay, but they weren't really ministered to because they like hymns. So you always have to have within your repertoire a little more, some updated, some praise and worship, some CC Winans kind. You know what I mean? A little bit of everything because you don't know who's going to be in your audience. But I am definitely have some song choices because of where it's going to be that's a little bit more like I did a reboot of Your Grace Is Enough, that everybody loves. We actually did the video at the Coney Island years ago. And so I was thinking about that because with each song, even if people don't remember the verses, you want them to remember the key phrase, your grace is enough. Release your power. You are God alone. So, because a lot of times they might, but they'll remember the hook or they'll remember the chorus, so they can come away with that. So I am calculated in that way of what I might do. I enjoy when I have the opportunity because I just call it, actually just testifying. And a lot of times when we testify to others about our journey, we need to be reminded as you're saying it, like, wow, right? Yeah. Because we get so caught up with whatever's going on now and what's to come, preparing for that. Sometimes we have to take a moment, reflect, and say, and give that testimony, say, God, if you hadn't given me, or put it this way, you can override when God tells you to put something in your spirit. But I thank God I didn't override the whole insurance thing because we've been in a pickle, my daughter and I. And that's not what God desired from us. But I also know that, you know what? God honors, because I tell people, I don't care what people, big controversial about, paying tithes and giving offering. Yes, I'm a tithe payer. You do you. It works for me. I got testimony. It works for me, and I will never change. I don't care what you say or what you think, whatever. And this is why I believe that God had even worked that out for me. And I always say it might not always come back monetarily, but in some way, my thing is okay. I sowed some on good ground too, so I know I'm a reap so a harvest. So I just thank God for having the opportunity to talk about a lot of stuff tonight, which I hadn't, in a while. So it's leaving me on a high.